Well, g'day everybody, it's Benjamin Morgan from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association again. There's actually going to be quite a few videos that we're going to put out today. And this particular video I'd like to discuss an issue that remains at the top of everybody's minds across the aviation industry, and that is Part 67 medical reform. Now, I actually just took a telephone call from a pilot and aircraft owner down in Victoria who was asking for an update as to what's happening with this. He runs a aircraft maintenance organisation and has a number of airplanes himself. And he was with a group of pilots and maintainers talking about the fact that the AVMED system is so broken and that they're all still continuing to experience problems in getting medicals renewed. Now, he's a pilot who's done a lot of flying in the United States and of course is intimately aware of how aircraft are owned and maintained abroad in the US. And he is incredibly frustrated, like so many of us across the aviation industry, on this particular issue, which is the issue of CASA moving to adopt the same medical standards that are now currently on offer throughout the United States, that are also on offer right throughout the United Kingdom. Standards which have been in place now for many years and have been extremely successful in helping reignite general aviation activity in those countries. Now, just to recap, and I know I've covered this issue a few times, I'm just going to recap here. Back in 2016-17, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association started some very public policy advocacy and medical policy debates centering on Part 67 and a need for Australia to follow the US at that time in adopting reform standards that would enable the aviation industry in Australia to benefit and to try and draw those opportunities towards some growth and some sustainability for general aviation. Now, those pleas from AOPA were thoroughly ignored until the then Minister for Transport, Darren Chester, through I believe what was just nothing short of frustration, was really pushing on CASA to say, let's get a review underway to try and quell what was some pretty considerable public debate through mainstream media which we were generating. Now, that process led to a medical reform review which was undertaken, and the aviation industry provided some very powerful and clear advice to CASA at the time, saying it was time to adopt the same standards that the US were adopting, which were sensible, which were going to be very safe. And again, at that time, CASA chose to ignore those requests, and it created a standard called the basic class. It was implemented into Australia and was just nothing short of a disaster, because CASA at the last moment decided to pull a bit of a swifty, and that was to mandate that that medical would require pilots to demonstrate an unconditional compliance to a commercial driver's licence standard, not using the Austroads private and not being pragmatic and sensible. And so since then, the situation has lingered on. We've continued to advocate in this space fiercely and ferociously on behalf of pilots and aircraft owners to get some change, and throughout CASA have dragged their heels, and I mean these guys have dragged their heels. Let's just recap: 2016-17, 18, 19, 2020, 2021, 2022. We're talking 5 to 6 years of CASA simply refusing to follow world's best practice, dreaming up every imaginable excuse along the way so as to justify them simply not delivering this standard to the industry. We've seen multiple DASs come in and go. We've seen board chairs come in and go. We've seen a parade of aviation ministers, ministers for infrastructure, come and go. We've seen governments change hands now, and yet we are no closer to achieving an outcome. And you've got to start asking the question, why? What is going on inside of CASA that it is unable to make a sensible decision based on international best practice and to get on with it? And so I thought I'd just spend some time after the telephone call that I just had from our member down in Victoria and just recap some facts. Now, when the original medical reform process took place, we were told as an industry that CASA were introducing the basic class 2, and that what they would do is 12 months after implementation, they would undertake a review and they would look at that standard with a view towards broadening its scope. Now, that never happened. That process never happened. There has never been a post-implementation review of the original reform, and so you've got to ask your question, why? What's going on down in Canberra? You know, CASA are, effectively a $300 million government-funded organisation. They delivered a half-baked reform which was designed to give us the Clayton's medical. That was a medical reform you get when you weren't getting one at all. They promised to undertake a review. They did absolutely nothing post-implementation review, and the clock has ticked on. We're now 2022, and God forbid, we're actually heading for 2023, and there's still no decision on it. Now, we were then told that CASA would launch a second round of consultation and that CASA wanted to get it right. We were told it's all about getting it right. We have to understand the risks. We've got to understand all of the information. Meanwhile, in the United States and the UK, they're now 5 and 6 years in on their medical reform, and the number of people participating on these reform medicals are now into, I think in the US it's now said to be nearly 80,000 pilots are flying on basic med. There's been no impact on aviation safety. There's been no pilots falling out of the sky due to medical incapacitation. They've simply gotten on with it. And they're now 6 years into driving growth into their aviation industry. They're 6 years into helping general aviation recover and really get flying. And if you've been to the United States, the one thing that you'll notice in the US right now is general aviation is absolutely thriving. It is on fire over there. They are going gangbusters. And yet here in Australia, we're dragging our asses. We're desperately seeking reforms to help us. We're asking the government to deliver us the necessary tools to help make it happen. And our good people down in Canberra, who are funded to the tune of nearly $300 million, our Director of Aviation Safety, who's receiving, it's reported, nearly $1 million a year salary, our key executive staff at CASA, who are on hundreds of thousands of dollars per annum, they are all earning a colossal amount of money, and they're not making any decisions. They're not giving us any outcomes. The situation is dragging on. And so I want to give everybody a bit of an insight as to how this situation has evolved. Now, we were told, big deal was made, we're going to do a Part 67 medical review. And everybody across the industry is like, great, they're finally going to get on with this. And by the way, it's pretty embarrassing for CASA, because when you're 6 years behind your international contemporaries and you're busy telling the Australian public that this is a world-class regulator, everyone can see through it. There's nothing world-class about what CASA's done in the AvMed space. In fact, it's rather third world, what they're doing in this space. But we'd entertain them. They were going into this 67 review, and we were hopeful that this was the moment in time to get it right. So they formed a technical working group. And this technical working group was effectively assembled around 2020, many, many years after the first medical reform was delivered. And they formed a technical working group which comprises of who? And so for those of you that don't understand how CASA work in this space, what they'll do is, even though the industry bodies which represent thousands of members across the country, organisations which are on a daily basis dealing with the industry at the coalface and who understand the issues and can see the challenges directly in front of them, associations who are providing this feedback directly to CASA saying, look, this is the direct touch and feel of what the industry is going to need if you're going to have general aviation recovery, we get told, no, we're not believing you. We want to form a technical working group. So they go out and they form these panels. Now, CASA divorced themselves purportedly from this process by having this thing called the ASAP. It's an external panel that reports to the Director of Aviation Safety called the Aviation Safety Advisory Panel. And this panel is basically full of individuals who are hand-selected. That's how it is. They're hand-selected by CASA. Maybe with the minister's consent, I don't know, but they're hand-selected by CASA to sit on these panels and to effectively mediate the needs of the industry by undertaking these review processes and then providing their advice to the Director of Aviation Safety. Just think about this for a minute. Right across the aviation industry, whether you're a member of the Sport Aircraft Association, you're a member of AOPA, you're a member of the aircraft engineering bodies, CASA basically says, we're not going to listen to those organisations. We want to go and create our own panel, which we hand select the participants. We'll ask the panels to then go and create working groups, which are hand selected representatives, and then they'll review the issues and then they will report back and tell us what we need. Does it sound like it's really reflective of the needs of the industry? The look on my face says everything you need to say. These things are the greatest quango that have ever been put in front of us. And it's the greatest dirty lie that's ever been promulgated to the industry, is that these consultative frameworks are purportedly representing the industry when they're not. And so I want to give you an insight as to how the situation with medical reform has evolved. Now, Part 67 Medical Review Technical Working Group was assembled by the ASAP, which was effectively led by Dr. Kate Manderson, and her team, and the ASAP, which I believe Pat Murray was responsible for selecting, and Pat Murray's tied right up with the government. He's a Quango sitter. Pat Murray is like the guy that gets invited to sit on everything because the government can rely on him. And Pat Murray, if you're listening, prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Come out and show me where you've thoroughly disagreed with the government and that you've actually gone against them and demanded that they deliver reforms that are sensible for the industry. And the reality is Pat Murray doesn't do that. Pat Murray's a pretty quiet guy. That's why he gets to sit as the chair of the panel, because they know they can rely on Pat Murray. But here we go. The selection, Pat Murray's selection, and Dr. Kate Manderson's selection for the people who got to review the industry's needs for medical reform. It was made up of Dr. Priti Bhatt, Dr. Ian Hosegood, Dr. Anthony McCarthy, Dr. Jeremy Robertson, Dr. Sarah Souter, Will Stampolis, butchered his name, Stampolis, Mr. John Raby, Mr. Matt Boutel. Now, let's just count the doctors, the aviation doctors or doctors in general that sat on this Part 67 review, the people who are deciding whether you as a pilot, aircraft owner and participant in this industry have a right to have medical reform. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 aviation, maybe even non-aviation related doctors, hand-selected by Pat Murray and possibly Kate Manderson to sit on a Part 67 working group to decide what the issues are and whether there's a need for CASA to reform its medical system. Now, if you're a doctor and you're a member of the Professional Doctors Association and you've got your colleagues sitting in the room and you're talking about a reform that's going to take away from the DAME community income, money, do you think these guys are going to be really eager to hand up the pie? I'm going to let you decide that, but I don't think so. And of the non-aviation doctors that are sitting on the panel, let's ask a question. Why is Matthew Boutel, the head of the RAOs, sitting on a panel that's deciding the medical standards for CASA licensed RPL and PPL holders? RAOs is a self-administration. They've got nothing to do. They've got literally nothing to do with general aviation, and yet the chief executive of the private company RAOs sits on this panel to decide whether general aviation pilots are entitled to medical reform. Now, I don't know what stacking looks like. I don't know what manipulating outcomes look like. I think that's a pretty good start by any measure. And so these guys are assigned to become the technical working group. So let's just have a look at the work of this technical working group. This technical working group met on the following dates. It met on the 3rd of December 2020. It then met on the 15th of September 2021. It then met on the 13th of October 2021. It then met on the 3rd of November 2021. It met on the 9th of December 2021. It then issued its first report at which it said there wasn't a consensus for a need for reform. We want to look at it some more. That happened on the 28th of March 2022. On the 25th of August, they issued a second report that said, yeah, we think there's a need for some reform, but we need to understand it better. In other words, we want to do more consultation. On the 25th of August 2022. Today is virtually the end of October 2022. There is quite literally just one more month remaining in this year for CASA to get any work done because, you know, guys down at CASA come December, it's Christmas time. And there's nothing better at Christmas time than earning hundreds of thousands of dollars on the government teat and not doing very much work in December because you know your big juicy annual leave is on its way. And God, you just don't want to do too much work because that'd be very stressful. So here's a technical working group that in the space of 3 years hasn't been able to come up with an answer. Meanwhile, the world's most successful general aviation economy, the US, has now been running reform medical standards for 6 years, has created 80,000 opportunities for pilots to get back involved in aviation. Their national general aviation economy is roaring. The UK pilot economy is doing the same. People are actually using these medical standards, are getting involved. And the very best of the executives at CASA, the Director of Aviation Safety, the Chairman of the Board, who, by the way, took the opportunity a few weeks ago to lecture the aviation industry on how organisations should stop complaining, they should stop whinging and accept that CASA is going to make do with what it's got. Mate, if this is the best you can do, CASA, God help us, because this is a national embarrassment. Now, Pip Spence made an undertaking to this industry and created a lot of good publicity, which frankly I supported. Publicity that stated she wanted to move the needle on general aviation and she wanted to get things done. Pip, how is this getting anything done? This is embarrassing for you. You are in charge of this. You are the Director of Aviation Safety. Now, I wrote to Pip Spence when these reports started coming out, and I complained on behalf of the aviation industry, and I said that the composition of this technical working group was nothing short of a disgrace, that the technical working group had been stacked with doctors, and that what should she expect? What could any person expect if you put a whole bunch of DAMEs and doctors in charge of a review process that says we're going to take business off the table and we're going to allow pilots to self-certify? They're going to say, oh, there's no consensus, we can't decide, because they're not going to be privy to the destruction of their own bloody fiefdoms. They're not going to do that. And so Pip was very quick to respond to let me know she didn't pick the panel. The panel was selected by the ASAP, and the ASAP, led by Pat Murray, is where that responsibility sits. So Pat Murray, you should be absolutely disgusted in yourself. And how about you do the industry a favour? Abject failure to run a consult in a timely fashion and produce a result. Do the industry a favour, Pat. Resign. Fill out the letter, send it in today, fall on your sword and get the hell out of the way and open up the seat so someone can come in and get the job done. Because it's unacceptable that you sit in these positions playing the type of dirty games that you're playing, loading up the panels with your mates, loading up the panels with people who are going to agree with the government and not give reform an honest chance of success. And that's just how I feel about it. It's an utter disgrace that these technical working groups have been run the way that they're run. They're run in secrecy. They're not open. Every single meeting of these technical working groups should be live broadcast for everyone in the industry to see. Every one of us in this aviation industry should be able to see what is being said and what is being discussed in these panels, because they're talking about the future of our industry. They're talking about our rights. These people who are unelected, hand-selected, Quango sitters are operating in secrecy, and we're expected to swallow these ridiculous, completely biased and unfair reports. I don't know if I can be much clearer on it. And so if everybody in the aviation industry is wondering where medical reform is at, medical reform once again has become locked in the filthy quagmire of politics within this industry, enabled and fostered by a broken consultative process that is being operated down in Canberra by people who are looking after people and seeing to it that their mates are all getting a chance at the table, instead of allowing sensible reform in this country to be brought forward so that the people of this industry have half a fighting chance of having an aviation industry in the next 5 to 10 years. That's what's happened with med reform. And so Pip, no doubt your team will be briefed on this video. I am disgusted, and I think every single representative, every single participant of this industry has a right to be disgusted. It shouldn't take you years to resolve this issue. You've been vested very important powers as the Director of Aviation Safety, with the ability to sign an exemption into place and then get your legislation in order. You shouldn't be making this industry wait another 12 months. You know damn well that the US medical reform processes work. You know damn well that the UK reform processes work. How about we stop looking after the Quangos and the mates in Canberra and we start looking after the industry? We start focusing on pilots, we start focusing on aircraft owners, we start focusing on the businesses that are out there doing the hard work. And if for the $1 million a year that you're paid, if you can't see that that's a sensible approach, maybe you too, Pip, need to resign your seat from CASA, and we need to start bringing some people in who'll do the damn job that they're there to do. The industry is tired of this constant flow of crap from CASA. Enough is enough. It's time to start getting on with delivering the reforms this industry needs so that we have an industry that will survive the next 5 years. It is that clear. So please, Can we stop this kind of bullshit? And can we get on with helping this industry move forward with sensible reforms that have been proven to be safe by the world's largest aviation safety regulator that now has 80,000 pilots flying on medical reform? We have 35,000 pilots in Australia. They've got more pilots flying on a reform medical than we even have pilots in this country. Wake up, CASA. Seriously, what the hell are you people doing with the hundreds of millions of dollars that the taxpayer is giving you? You don't need to be consulting these issues further. The only reason CASA has to continue this bullshit is you just don't want to make the decision and you want to keep collecting the money. The longer you can keep it going on, the longer you can collect the money. And it's become as transparent as daylight as to what's going on. So please, can we stop the crap and can we deliver the industry the reforms it needs? And with that, I thank everybody for the time. Some straight shooting, straight talk from Ben Morgan today. If you're offended, I do apologise, but you know what? The truth is the truth. This is what's going on down in Canberra. This is what's happening to our aviation industry, and this is the power that these people hold over the top of us, and it's nothing short of absolutely disgraceful. So if you support and you like the work that we do at AOPA Australia to try and drive reform into this industry, to see to it that we're going to have a general aviation community in another 5 to 10 years, and that young people across the country have got a chance to become involved in aviation, then I do encourage you to take up a membership to AOPA at www.aopa.com.au. For just $159, you too can stand with me and our board, and you can be fighting for the issues that really do matter for our industry. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Until next time.